Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Flawed Theology Podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Susie, and we're asking the question, if your theology were wrong, wouldn't you want to know?
All right, so we are back. It's trying to get back in the groove here. We just released the, I don't know what you call it, shocker episode or the catch-up episode
like
after the long break that we had from the summer, and then it kind of bled into the fall. So we're trying to get back into some kind of routine here now that there's a little bit of break in the sports action and all that stuff. So
the sad thing is the interview that we are attaching to the end of this episode was July. How many months ago? 3 months,
it's
4
like
months
3
ago?
months ago. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's been like, I feel like I have like no time to do anything, even though so my coaching season is over right now for soccer, but I still feel like I don't have any time to do anything. Like,
I know.
It's like there's always something else.
There's something else to fill the empty spot.
Yeah. So today we thought we're just going to do kind of a little chat, and then we're going to run the interview that Susie did with Lars and family. And I think you guys will certainly enjoy it. But we wanted to touch base about a couple of things. Probably most notable, of course, the thing that happened in the most recent history is the election here in the U.S. For you, those listening abroad, maybe you're probably, from what I've heard, most of the world is just as stunned about it as we are. I've been talking to a couple of friends, in Europe, and Alex, who's in the Netherlands, and he's like, most of Europe is dumbfounded about this. So,
well, I think a lot of the US is also dumbfounded. I honestly thought she was going to win. I did not think that there would be enough people in the US who were either uninformed or racist / misogynistic / ignorant that they would vote for him. I didn't think there were enough, but apparently there are. And that makes me sad.
That's the thing that I've been kind of, digging into this a little bit post-election, like you do, you kind of have like a post-mortem and be like, well, what went wrong? There's that side of it, which, I think is valid. There was a huge turnout of the Trump base that I think basically really, again, wasn't accounted for by the Democrats. Like they thought, oh, well, there's not that many people that really think this guy is going to win. He's bombastic. He says crazy shit. I mean, his rallies, it seems like every day was saying something at a rally that was like more ridiculous than the next thing. And you think, well, how could anyone get behind that? But like the thing that I've realized in kind of reading a lot of stuff is like, I think we meaning Democrats in general, like kind of misunderstood the real anger that is in the country from a lot of people, not just in the classical Trump base, but even amongst like people of color and Latinos and all that kind of stuff. Because I think a lot of us are like, well, how did he get Latinos and Black people to vote for him? And I read some things saying, well, I think the Democrats think that when they hear Latino, they think it's only people that just got here in this country, and they forget about the second and third generation Latino population that has been here. And for them, I think they got sold, and this is true, I think, for the Black community too, they got sold on the economic thing. I saw a really interesting graphic that was a result of a survey that the misinformation about certain aspects of the economy and immigration and crime were huge factors in why people voted the way they were. And the graphic shows, and we'll attach it to the notes or something. The graphic was like the perception on these issues was so drastically different than the actual reality of the issues. And people were voting based on their perception of the issue. I'm trying to find...
That's my feeling as well, that this election was lost because of misinformation. It was lost because of the right-wing propaganda machine, which is Fox News plus like the top 20 podcasts in the U.S., which are all... I mean, the Democrats have like Pod Save America and The Daily or something. That's 2. And the other side has dozens that people listen to. And coming up to the election, I could see the misinformation and I could see the reality. And I had more faith than warranted that people would see through the bullshit, see through the misinformation, and actually see the reality. And I thought there would be enough people that Kamala Harris would be elected, but there wasn't.
That's what I thought too. And I think that's why my focus a lot of times, if I did post political things like on my personal page, it was never like necessarily anti-Trump stuff. It was more like, here's the issue and here's the facts about this issue. And the other thing I think that the Democrats didn't account for is Kamala Harris is actually a fairly moderate candidate. The right-wing propaganda painted her as a left-wing liberal progressive candidate when most of the Democratic, actually left-leaning base thinks that she was too moderate and too right-wing. And she catered to that moderate base of Democrats and then inadvertently alienated a lot of the really left-wing, liberal, progressive Democratic base. They didn't vote at all. And it seems like most people that didn't vote at all were in solidly blue states, but the issue, I think, in those situations is that Trump overperformed in the states that he was supposed to win anyway, but he won them by such a huge margin that it basically kind of canceled out Kamala's wins in the places where she should have won, and she just kind of barely won those things. I mean, the fact that Trump won all 7 battleground states tells you that the disinformation machine and misinformation machine is well oiled. And the Democrats they've never had a counter to that. I mean, even when I was a conservative, I used to listen to talk radio like Hannity and Rush. Mm-hmm. But even then, there was no counter. There was nothing in the media that could counter the kind of right-wing talk radio thing.
Yeah.
And now that's shifted to podcasts. And then you've got the additional Russian interference thing where they were pushing a lot of, misinformation as well. So
yes. One of the YouTubers I follow is Brian Tyler Cohen. He's a huge progressive independent media. And he was saying that a lot of the left wing considers mainstream media as like our outlet.
Right.
And he was saying it's not. They don't do us any favors. We need to stop thinking about them as our friend and push into independent media.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because the Republicans and conservative right wings paint the regular mainstream media as liberal when
like fake news.
It's not really liberal. Like, it's actually mostly objective, fact-based. And, kind of what I've learned from this is like that facts don't really seem to matter anymore. Like, and I think that's been going since 2016. Like, the facts don't matter. It's about how you perceive what you think is fact. And I think that ties in really well to why the Christian right and Christian nationalism is a thing. You're already primed to basically believe things without evidence.
Yeah.
You make your decisions based on emotion. Mm-hmm. The graphic that I referenced earlier is from an Axios poll. I'll try to put this on the thing because you're not going to be able to obviously see it here. But the interesting thing, like the main things they talked about in the survey were violent crime, inflation, the stock market, and then unauthorized border crossings. So the graphic kind of shows like, here's the actual fact, like violent crime is at an all-time high in most American cities. So the truth of that statement is actually false. But the perception of voters is Democrats didn't think that it was true. And then Republicans thought that it was true. So it goes to show you that like the reality, Democrats knew the reality and Republicans basically fell for the lie, which was that high crime is at an all-time high. The next one was about inflation. That inflation in the U.S. has declined over the last year is actually near historic averages, which is true. Democrats agreed that was true. Republicans thought that was false. And that's what their media told them, was that inflation is high, which it was high, is now declined. It's actually at normal historic levels, but that's not what they thought. And they voted accordingly.
And they don't fact check. Right. They don't care about what the facts or the reality is.
Right.
In a way, they're gullible and they're easily manipulated by their leader. Well, to change gears a little bit, how did you react like on the first day, Wednesday, November 6th, waking up to the reality that Trump had won the election and we're going to have to go through another 4 years of Trump? What was that day like for you?
Well, so it started kind of the night before because I stayed up till about midnight and I was like, this isn't really looking good, but I kind of had some hope for the battleground states based on like the early data that was coming in. I was like, okay, well, she could win some of these and it could kind of turn around. I happened to wake up at like 2:30 in the morning to go to the bathroom or something. And I made the mistake of looking at my phone and see that they still hadn't called it, but it was really close. Like I think Trump was at 266 and she was at 224. And I was like, oh shit, this is not good. When I woke up in the morning and saw that they had called it basically for Trump, I mean, obviously, oh fuck was kind of the first thought. And then my job is kind of a interesting location because it's it's a military base. So there's a lot of like right-wing people there, but there's also, there's kind of a smattering of opinions. So I was kind of expecting to go into work and there's a group of people that sit next to us in the cubes, and I call them the cube, and I spell it QUBE because they're like QAnon people. So really, I think most of the day I was like kind of a little bit numbed out to it. I was certainly really concerned because I was actually not concerned so much about Trump and the personality thing and like all of his craziness. I was more concerned about the behind the scenes people that are now going to be kind of pulling the strings and the Supreme Court thing and the House and the Senate. He's going to basically have no checks and balances.
Yeah, exactly.
And people say, oh, we've had this before.
The first time he had the guardrails.
Right. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like he has no clue what he's doing. And if he's going to put a bunch of sycophants in positions that are going to be actually running the country, I think that's what's actually dangerous. Like putting Musk in charge of like efficiency is going to cause a real problem. Putting RFK in charge of public health is going to cause a real problem.
It's going to be horrible.
And then Project 2025, which everyone they wanted to try to say was bullshit. That's the stuff that is really, truly scary. Like the things that Project 2025 wants to dismantle are basically the freedoms of what make this country what it is.
Yes.
So now I've kind of shifted gears to like educating people about, here's what we need to do now, and I don't know, obviously, what we need to do now. And for me, the scary thing is like, what happens when he tries to change the law to get rid of term limits?
Oh, he's going to try to never leave. I had this thought, and I don't know if this is true. I didn't hear this on any podcast or anything, but I kind of wish that Biden had lost in 2020 because Trump would have just taken office again. He wouldn't have had 4 years in between to scheme, come up with all these plans, come up with Project 2025, surround himself with new people who are basically his yes men. He's not going to have Mike Pence in there this time to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Well, the other thing with that is if the main reason that the country recovered from COVID and Trump's mismanagement and the tariffs that he put in position in 2016, all that stuff, we recovered from that because of Biden, even though people don't like everything that he did. If Trump would have been in there second,
it would have gotten so much worse.
The country would have went to shit earlier.
And then there would have been nobody to blame but Trump.
Right.
And he would be out right now anyway because of the term limits, and we wouldn't be having to deal with this right now. And I kind of am scared that MAGA is stronger than ever because even when Trump, he may, since he's in the throes of cognitive decline, he may be unfit for duty in 1 or 2 years. Then we're going to have President J.D. Vance, which is sort of even scarier than Trump because he is a little bit more convincing sounding. He sounds more sane. He's a really good debater, and he has guile. So he scares me, and he has really dangerous ideas. Is he going to be the new MAGA candidate, or are they going to find somebody else to be the new MAGA candidate? It's almost like MAGA is a new party. And because Trump won this time, instead of fizzling out like I kind of thought it was going to, it's going to get stronger. And I'm scared. I'm really scared. On Wednesday, it was a terrible day, not just for that, but for a lot of terrible things happened that day. Just personally. And so it was a very hard day, but the amount of anxiety in my body just from the shock and the terror of realizing what the next 4 years plus is going to bring was unthinkable. And my body just kind of like shut down. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely work. I had to kind of call out of a lot of meetings. And I felt stupid doing that because I know I'm not alone. Like I know there's everybody who voted against Trump is in the same boat, but I don't know why I couldn't handle it that day, but I couldn't. It's getting better now. I've made the choice to not engage in the political sphere at the moment, just to give me time to de-stress, get all the anxiety out. I went to the library, got a novel. I'm going to read that novel, and then I'm going to reassess when I'm done. So anybody listening, if you are feeling the same way that I am, it's okay to take a break. Just take a break from it all. It'll still be there when you come back. You can catch up when you are in a better headspace to be able to handle it all without breaking down.
All right, well, let's move on from that exciting topic to something that you came across that's more in the realm of what this podcast is about, since we're not Brian Tyler Cohen. What did you come across about holy water?
So this was on the front page of Reddit, and it caught my eye. It was linked to an article on Catholic.com, which is Catholic Answers. It's like a question and answer, and it's called Adding to Holy Water. And the question is, does adding plain water to already blessed holy water make the added water holy? Is this a question that has kept you up at night, Phil?
No. Seeing that I didn't grow up Catholic, so nowadays Catholics are just another flavor, and their customs and things are just like, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's special.
Did Baptists use holy water, or just like in baptism?
No, Baptists don't use holy water. They think Catholics are heathens because they don't immerse for baptism. So holy water is not a thing.
The water they use for baptism, is that regular tap water, or is it in some way made special or holy?
Yeah, I've been a part of many baptisms, and having a dad who was a pastor who baptized people, and I've never seen any Baptist pastor like bless the water in the baptistry.
Okay.
Baptism is very symbolic in the Baptist tradition. So, yeah.
I don't know about Lutherans. Looking back, I remember a lot of blessing of the wine. I don't know if they blessed the water. I feel like they did. Like they filled
Like
up
when they do the
baptismal
baptism?
font. Yeah, I feel like they fill up the baptismal font and then the pastor does something over the water, like to bless it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not positive. It's been a long time. All right. So the answer to this question is the common custom, though not officially recognized, is that so long as the water added to the holy water does not amount to half the amount of the holy water, then all water in the container is considered blessed water. Okay. The first thing I want to point out about this is that the way that they phrase this, as long as the water added to the holy water does not amount to half the amount of the holy water. Half is just 50%.
Right.
I think they meant more than half, right?
More
half
than
or
half,
more.
Yeah. Well, it's not officially recognized. So this guy's just talking out of his ass. Who's this guy?
But what he's saying is basically like, as long as it's not exactly 50%, it can be any percent and it will be fine.
Right.
But that's not what they mean. All right. So we're just going to assume that they mean
more than half.
More than half.
Yeah.
So it goes on. The reverse is also the common understanding. Adding the thimble of holy water to a gallon of regular water does not make the container full of holy water. The holy water would need to be more than 50% of the combined water. So they made it clear there.
Yeah, they
As previously stated, this is common custom and not official teaching, since it does not take very long for a priest or deacon to bless water. Adding regular water to holy water should only be done when absolutely necessary. Okay.
What does that mean? Like if you're having like a really long baptism service and like the font is getting low, like, hey, this thing needs a top off.
Yeah. One of my questions, because I have so many, is if it doesn't take very long to bless water, why would you ever add more water instead of just like blessing new water?
Well, why wouldn't you just go bless the faucet in the church?
Right.
Everything that comes out of this faucet has been blessed and consecrated for God's use. And then
sort of like a filter that you put under the faucet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The water runs through the filter. Everything is clean. We can have a holy filter on the tap.
Right. Better than that, how about a holy water system down in the basement that's sponsored by Connecticut?
Why stop there?
Right.
Can you just bless the entire ocean?
Right.
How far does the blessing reach when you stand? Like if you were to stand in front of the ocean and bless the ocean, how far does it go? Does it hit all contiguous water molecules?
Right. Well, and especially like what happens when it rains, because that's not enough rain to obviously be more than 50%. So you got to go out and bless the ocean again. Or could you just bless the rain? Can you just go bless the clouds?
Wait, is the rain already blessed? Because if you've blessed the ocean's evaporating. But does the holiness stay behind? That like being distilled water? So does the holiness stay with the minerals after you distill the water, after the water evaporates? Or is it going up to the clouds, and are the clouds now holy?
Yeah, it's like making sea salt. So is the salt really where the holiness is when you evaporate?
You could sell that.
Right.
It's holy salt. You could have like
salt.
Holy soft pretzels with the salt on it and pork rinds. I mean, there's so much.
I just scrubbed my cast iron the other day with some coarse salt. It could have been holy salt.
And you could have had holy steaks.
It would have really got that freaking caramelized honey off really well.
I think there's a lot of ramifications to the holy water that the Catholics haven't thought of. Maybe we should let them know about all these missed opportunities for blessing of water.
Well, what's funny is on that page, if you scroll down where it says more from Catholic.com, there's like 10 other little articles about holy water. And let's just read the titles because they're hilarious. Is it appropriate to empty the holy water fonts during Lent? Okay, so that's one. Okay. Or how about any time? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Why Lent?
I know there is a process to get rid of the holy water, like when they have to empty that thing. There's some kind of, I don't know if it's like a deholification that they can go and like unbless it and then they can just pour it down the sink.
Does somebody have to drink it?
I don't know.
I know in the Lutheran church, after the wine is blessed, somebody has to drink it. They don't put it down the sink.
Right.
So then that was weird to me, because then what happens to the holiness when it's inside you? Do you digest the holiness or do you pee it out? What's happening to it?
It's filtered out by your kidneys.
Yeah.
Who knew kidneys also filter holiness?
May I use a normal bottle for holy water?
Yeah.
That's another one.
Water added to wine during Mass. So that's about cheating on the wine.
Why would you do that?
What if you add the holy water to the wine? Then is it like double holy?
Is it double? Yeah.
Oh,
Here's a thing that somebody on Reddit said, which I thought was really funny. It's the whole thing about adding, as long as you add less than 50% of the holy water to the container, then all of it is holy. Mm-hmm. Well, how far does that go? Let's say you have 10 ounces of holy water, and then you add 4 ounces of regular water. You now have 14 ounces of holy water.
Right.
You come back the next day, you add another 6 ounces of regular water, and now you have 20 ounces of holy water. You've just found a cheat code. It's like an infinite loop of holy water, and all you have to do, maybe you don't have to wait a day. Maybe you only wait five minutes.
Right.
I mean, what is the amount of time you have to wait between adding the water where it's not
getting diluted?
Like, yeah. Like, how long does it take for the added water to become holy, so that way you can add more water and it doesn't dilute the regular water, it dilutes the holy water.
Right. I like if you scroll over on these Q&As, here's one: why using holy water isn't superstitious.
Oh,
I'd love to see the rationale for that. How do I explain the use power of holy water to a Catholic who believes it's superstitious?
Yeah.
How about any person?
Yeah, any person, but they're really concerned about what Catholics think about it.
I know.
And then there's also lots of articles about Bible verses supporting the use of holy water, because apparently Catholics have been attacked for kind of just making this up, that this isn't biblically based. And they're like, no, it is, because of these 3 very vague verses. I read it this morning. It was like, they're really reaching. They picked
and they're
3
from
verses
Numbers
about water.
too. Like, the main one is from Numbers, which is Old Testament. So that's just weird in and of
itself. Was that where like you have to wash yourself to be clean after you touch a dead person or something? You have to wash yourself with water.
It's like where it was used in a ritual, and it says, "And the priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and take some of the dust that is on the floor of the tabernacle and put it into the water." This shows that the holy water not only has a basis in the Bible, but has been around since the days of Moses.
Oh, well, there you go.
Holy water was used for numerous Old Testament ceremonies that involved ceremonial sprinklings and washings. Today, we are not bound to perform those ceremonies, but the holy water was used at all proves that it is not a superstitious or invalid practice.
I mean, no, it is. So my main question today was, what are the uses for holy water in Catholicism? And this is funny. So I found like this bulleted list on Catholic.com. For one thing, it helps us to overcome temptations. If I want ice cream and I know I shouldn't have it, do I just sprinkle holy water on myself and then it helps me overcome my temptation?
Well, you, the regular person, can't have holy water. Like, only the priest can bless the water.
No,
so,
but you can bring it home.
Oh, I can bring it home.
The most pious Catholics have holy water fonts in the entrance of their homes and in common rooms.
Is it pre-blessed and they bring it home? They probably had to buy it, of course. Like, that's kind of how that works.
Yeah, or they go to their priest and get some. And this is dangerous. It says it drives away sickness and future illnesses. That's just not true.
No.
Holy water can keep away illnesses of the body, mind, and soul. I mean, that's just bullshit. So this is actually making me mad. I don't think that they should be telling people this.
Yeah. If it's holy, also, that means it shouldn't be able to grow any kind of bacteria, right? Like, if it's in your font in your home,
you're
then
right.
It should just be able to sit there and never grow bacteria or get moldy, pink slime.
That's great. Yes.
And then if it does, is that holy pink slime?
Yeah, it must be.
Because that seems marketable too.
Yeah, holy pink slime.
Yeah. All right,
so another one is that it removes venial sins. Venial. I wasn't sure what this meant, but it means like not a mortal sin. I guess it's more like a misdemeanor instead of a felony. And then, of course, it drives away the devil.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, your magic water, of course, is going to drive away the magic fake devil. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, the devil that doesn't exist is going to be driven away by the imaginary holy water. That makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Can you make holy water ice cubes? I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't, right? So break them out at the baptismal gathering afterwards.
Right.
Break out the holy ice cubes. Is there holy water vapor?
They can make holy slushies too, or holy margaritas.
Can you bless a swimming pool?
I don't see why not. I'm sure there's rules about what they can bless, and like some devout Catholic would probably be like, you guys are trivializing the process of holy water. But
yes, that's what we do.
We would never do such a thing. We hold this in high regard, clearly.
I just think they can't make all these assertions about holy water that they're saying this is real. You can't make a statement like that and not be able to field these questions that come up. If you say something's real, then these are the implications of this thing is real. Right. Can you have holy water ice cubes? Can you bless the ocean? What happens when you drink it? Does the holiness stay behind when the water evaporates? or does it go to the clouds?
Right.
These are real questions. Tell me these answers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it reminds me of like your question. I'm going to segue to something else, but it reminds me of your question about the communion bread that you asked when you were a child.
Oh, yes.
How is it bread and also the body of Christ at the same time? Well, it just is. It's really the only answer.
Right. But if I look at the molecules, am I going to see bread molecules?
Right.
Or am I going to see like something holy in there? And also, if it did change, why does it look the same as it did before? Because you would expect that if it actually did change, and this is 100% real, that you would see a change in the communion wafers before they were blessed and after they were blessed.
Right.
But if it was not real, what you would expect is that there would be no difference, which is what happened. And I think that was always on my mind as a kid. I don't know. I was just too analytical. I didn't understand how everybody was just like, yeah, sure, this is real. And this is God's in this wafer. I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's interesting because like in the Baptist tradition, they never said that the body and that the cracker or the juice was the blood. It was always just symbolic. So that's how they got around it. They're like, well, it's just symbolic, which of course, then you don't really question it, but if you're in one of those more high church things where they believe, like Catholics believe in transubstantiation, they believe that it literally turns into the body and blood, which I guess Lutherans believe something similar, that it turns into it, or it co-locates with the bread.
I can't remember the term that they use, but it's more like, they exist at the same time. And it's like God's essence is in with and under the bread and the wine.
Right.
But it doesn't actually turn into the bread and the wine.
So it's just the essence of.
Yeah. Which is a really also another way to get around the whole. That's why it doesn't change.
Right. It's just an essence. Like,
yeah.
Well, and the reason I thought of that is because the book that our stories is in has now, it's got a release date, which is going to be January of 2025. So right before the country goes to hell in a handbasket, you can read the book that Susie and our stories is called Apostate Stories of Deconversion. I'm not sure where it's going to be distributed, but it should be out and about, and we'll keep you guys posted about that. And the other cool thing about that, which I don't think we mentioned last time, is there's going to be an audio book of it too that our editor is going to read. So that's going to be really cool. So all right, so let's talk a little bit about our last episode where we kind of talked about the future plan. I've had a couple people reach out, and say, hey, is the podcast going away? And, and then I've had a couple reach out and say, hey, if you're looking for a co-host, put me on the list. So just to keep you guys kind of posted or, updates, there's nothing really new that's changed, but we're still trying to figure out what the plan is as Susie kind of transitions. We're planning to have, I'm not sure how many more episodes this season, at least through the end of the year. There's a couple of guests that I think we want to try to get to. I would love to get April back on, especially since she wrote a book about Christian nationalism, and especially since Trump won. I'm going to reach back out to her, see if we can get her on. But yeah, let's talk about the interview that you had with Lars, and that's going to be the remainder of the episode. We'll just let you guys listen to that conversation. Is there anything you want to kind of share to introduce it?
Well, I think this was a really good conversation because it was deeply personal for them. We talked a lot of the time about their trans son coming out, and I forget how old he is. I think he's only like 11, maybe. Lars will surely be contacting me to correct me on that. It was nice to get to talk to him and get his firsthand thoughts about the whole process. And also, I thought it was interesting because my daughter was there and she had never been exposed to any of these ideas. And so we kind of introduced her to that and got her reactions. And she handled it really well. She essentially was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
The other part that I liked is seeing how Lars and Christie handled the whole thing in a very accommodating, no pressure manner for Alex, their son.
Yeah, which is very impressive.
Yeah, the whole struggle with the relatives who obviously are all conservative. I think it's something that we can all identify with, even if we don't have any trans people in our life. We are the ones who, for most of us, went against the grain of our families. We disagreed. We stepped aside. We said, no, we're going to do things a different way. And we all have difficulties relating to the people in our families who think differently than us. So I think this is a valuable conversation just for that.
Yeah. Hope you guys really enjoy the conversation between Susie and Lars and his family. And here's the interview.
Hi, everybody. We are here with Lars and his family, and we are having an impromptu episode.
Hello.
Hi.
And we have his family here. We have Alex, who is, how old are you, Alex?
10.
And we have my daughter, Audrey, who is 9. And everybody else is playing Switch and doing various other things. As a quick disclaimer, if the audio sucks for this episode, it's because we're doing this at my kitchen table. It's very echoey and there are cats running around. There are 6 children in this house and my husband who likes to talk a lot. So we'll hear him in the background. This is so impromptu that we couldn't get Phil in time to sit in on this episode with us. That's unfortunate because he's really good at the whole hosting thing and I'm really good at the co-hosting thing, not being the main host, but I'm going to do my best. Lars and Christie, would you like to introduce yourself and explain who you are?
Sure. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've probably heard me a few times and heard me referenced even more times. I definitely appreciate the shout-outs every time you do them. Yeah. And I was raised very evangelical fundamentalist. I eventually figured out that evolution is true around the age of 30. That was 10 years ago. And about 3 years ago, we officially recognized that we no longer believed anything about Christianity was true and broke away from the church. That included our kids who had been going to church up to that point, sort of. It was during quarantine, so we had dropped in-person services. And we've been doing our best to be secular parents ever since, letting our kids explore ideas on their own terms without the thought control that religion often imposes.
And I think you're doing a good job of that.
Thank you.
What about you, Christy?
Yeah, I was also raised, kind of fundamentalist Christian, and I was in it slightly longer than Lars. He kind of led the way with really understanding that evolution is true. I had a science background, so I knew a lot of that information, but I didn't know any geology, and so some of the things that he brought to my attention helped me realize that evolution was true, and then that kind of set the ball rolling for questioning all of the parts of the Bible of is this literal or is this just the author's ideas? It got to the point where I was sitting in church and kind of cynical about everything I was hearing. And so we did eventually kind of admit to each other we didn't believe anymore.
That's a hard step, just to admit it to yourself and to each other.
Yeah.
So tell me why you are here in my little county on the East Coast.
So this is actually related to being non-religious. Some of my best memories of childhood were from going to summer camp. This was Bible camp, and I don't really remember much of the Bible lessons at all. But I did have many good friends, make many good memories from that time. We wanted to give our kids some sort of the same opportunity. Unfortunately, many summer camps are explicitly religious, and many of them that are not explicitly religious are still run in a fairly religious way. So we wanted to find one that was not. I found out about the organization known as Camp Quest. One of the chapters of Camp Quest recently changed their location to be here in Maryland, not far from where Susie lives. So we figured we'd drop by on the way home from picking up our kids and meet in person.
Yeah, it is actually the first time we've met in person, but it feels like we've gotten to know each other for a long time.
We have. I first went on your podcast around 2 years ago.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's lots of chatting and whatever in between. How was the camp? Did you go to the camp, Alex? How was the camp for you? Did you like it?
Yes, and I made lots of new friends from last year. I saw one of my old friends.
Okay, that's cool. What kind of things did they teach? Did they teach you anything?
They taught us, the theme of the camp for the week that we were there was reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Oh, I love that.
And they taught us how to make oobleck for one of the activities, because every day we have 2 electives. And I also made elephant toothpaste.
Is that toothpaste for elephants or toothpaste made of elephants?
No, neither.
Okay. What is it?
It's a chemical reaction that makes a large explosion that kind of looks like toothpaste.
Okay. What about the elephant part? What is that? How does that come in? Is it just because it's big?
Because it's big.
Okay. Well, that sounds really cool and way better than the camps that I went to when I was little. I also went to a camp that was in the Virginia mountains near Camp David. And it was a week-long camp where it actually wasn't too bad with the indoctrination. We just did like campfire religious songs and stuff, but the rest of it was really fun. But I would have loved to go to a camp that taught critical thinking, free thinking, and those kinds of ideas
instead of telling you what to think.
Yeah, that was definitely a factor in Bible camp growing up. I was pure indoctrination every time there was any sort of teaching session. Morning devotions, morning lesson, afternoon lesson, and evening lesson. Usually centered around some theme for the year, and all of it very familiar to anyone who had grown up in the church, which is why I don't really remember any specifics, because by the time you're 10, if you've grown up in the church, you've heard all the sermons. You know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
But in this camp, they had a gender-inclusive one as well for people who were, like, trans or just wanted to be, like, both or gay or lesbians.
Yeah. So that's something that they never had at the camps when I was growing up.
Certainly not.
Alex, is that important to you to have that inclusivity?
Yes, because I am trans myself.
Okay.
And everyone in that cabin was very nice when I hung around with them.
Okay. Were there separate boys and girls cabins?
Yes.
Okay. Did you get to choose which cabin you wanted to be in?
Yes. I had the option with the gender inclusive and the boys because I was born a girl, but I would rather be known as a boy.
Okay. So are you saying there were 3 options? There was a girls' cabin, a boys' cabin, and a gender inclusive cabin?
Yes.
Okay. So you stayed in the gender inclusive cabin? Is that the one?
No, I went in the boys' cabin.
You stayed in the boys' cabin. Okay. So can I ask you some more questions about that?
Okay.
Okay. How long ago did you know that you wanted to be a boy? When did you first start having those feelings?
Maybe around like 6 or 7 years old.
Wow, that early.
Yeah.
And what did that feel like for you? Was it confusing?
Yeah, it was confusing, and I didn't really want to talk about it because I didn't see anyone else in my family like it, so I didn't really speak.
Okay. Specifically, do you remember what kind of things made you think that you would rather be a boy when you were that young? Like,
was it
the kind of toys that you liked better, or the clothes, or like the people you wanted to hang out with, or was it something else?
Kind of all of this.
That's super interesting to me. So when did you feel comfortable telling your parents?
Just about like a month ago or so.
A month ago? So for Pride Month, that's when you told them? Did you mean to do it during Pride Month, or did that just happen that way?
It just happened that way.
Okay.
But we announced
Seems like a God thing.
But we announced it publicly on the first day of June.
Yes.
Which is Pride Month.
Yes, and I remember that. Did you feel nervous when you knew that your parents were going to announce it publicly?
Nervous and excited.
Excited? Why were you excited?
So that I could be more known as who I would like to be rather than who they saw me as before.
Oh, I love that. So you could be your authentic self. You know, we've all been through that struggle too. That's not a feeling that only you have.
And just to be clear, Alex specifically that we make an announcement. We were also fine keeping it as quiet as he wanted us to.
Can I ask your parents some questions about this too? Okay. Did you have any inkling before he told you?
No.
No, it was
Not
a big
at all.
surprise.
Really?
Yeah.
So your gut reaction the very first moment he told you, what was that?
So the way it ended up happening was I was driving the kids home from school, and Alex asked if he could be called Alex. And I was like, maybe? Can you tell me why you want to be called Alex? And at first he said, no, I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, well, it kind of sounds a little bit more like a boy's name. Is that why you want a name that's more like a boy's name? And he said yes. And I'm like, is it because you feel more like a boy? And he said yes.
Wow. So you were really patiently trying to get that information out by asking understanding questions that weren't like accusatory, but were more designed to get him to feel comfortable.
Yeah. And, I just wanted to know, because it did seem a little bit odd. Like sometimes our kids will say they don't really like their names or they want a new nickname or something, but this seemed kind of a little more specific.
Yeah. So then he didn't tell you at the same time then, it sounds like. Lars, you found out later?
Well, it was the same day, but later on. The conversation was entirely on the way home from school. So I found out then, and certainly I was shocked. And so this is one of the cases where being a secular parent as opposed to a religious one really comes in handy. We're not bound by any sort of tradition. We're not bound by any sort of rules other than the law. So we were able to just do our best to take it in stride. I don't have to be the head of the household and enforce the rules. I don't have to look to a book to tell me whether this is okay or not. Since being trans isn't actively hurting anyone else and seems to be helpful to Alex, it's something we want to support. Now, we're also not going to be dogmatic about it. If it ends up being something that only lasts for a while, then that's all it is. And there's certainly some amount of grief because I had all these expectations for raising up a girl, and those expectations are probably not going to be met now. And grief is often the result of unmet expectations. And so that's something we've had to deal with. But at the same time, my personal level of grief it's not inconsequential, but it is less important than my child living a happy life.
Right.
So whether that child is my daughter or my son, I'd much rather they live a happy, healthy life than conform to some ideas that I have just because they make me more comfortable.
Right. Which is so different from how we were raised and how our parents treat us with respect to our beliefs or the beliefs that we don't have.
Right.
Christy, how are you feeling in regards to Alex?
So there was a period of adjustment over the course of a few days where we had to make some decisions about like who to tell and that sort of thing. So, he asked for the name change and everything. And I think it was either the next day or the day after that he had a haircut scheduled to get a pixie cut like mine. And that was already on the calendar from like weeks back. We also made some plans to go thrift store shopping and get some more boys' clothes for him to wear. There was still like a lot of decision making about like, do we tell people now? Do we wait and see if like, because this was all a big surprise to us. And so we're like, is this really happening, or is this something we should just kind of wait and see how he feels, in a few days or a few weeks? But we wanted to kind of go forward with it a little bit more quickly than even we were super comfortable with, because at least I could see that any reference to his old way of being referred to was painful to him. So like we went to the haircut and I made the reservation in the name of Amy instead of Alex. And I said, it's like a women's haircut. And so we got to the haircut place and I introduced him as Alex, but I did not say, this is my son. And I feel bad about that. I should have said up front. But we went through with the haircut, and the woman there is a Christian, which is part of why I didn't necessarily want to say anything. And she kept on referring throughout the haircut of like, oh, you look so beautiful, your daughter, such and such. Every time I could see him squirming in the chair. Wow. I could see like, okay, this is definitely something that's really important to him to be known as a boy. And then the next, actually later that day, I think it was earlier, we saw my parents, and we already knew that.
It was later that day, we went to the baseball game.
I'm talking about the previous day. We went to a thing at the kids' school. Lars and I already knew about Alex being trans, but we didn't tell my parents at that point, and Alex didn't have the haircut yet. That was a little bit early on. And then the following day after the haircut, we went to a baseball game with my parents, and we gave Alex the choice. We said, like, we haven't gotten a chance to write up anything or tell anything to anybody yet about Alex, being trans. And so we're like, we could tell my parents at the beginning of the baseball game and things might be awkward for the whole game. Or you could just go by Amy for one more day, because we were planning on like writing something up and then posting it like on June 1st. So Alex did decide to go by Amy for the sake of keeping the peace with my parents at the baseball game. It's just a little bit easier to do it not in person because people have feelings that can blow up. Yeah. So he went by Amy for the baseball game.
I bet that was hard.
And I could see as well that being hard for him during that time. And so it was kind of scary that like it was all happening so fast, but like it felt like the right move to go forward with what Alex wanted of telling everybody, getting that that word out as quickly as possible so he wouldn't have any more of those experiences like in the haircut place or at the baseball game.
And it's interesting that you say it was almost physically painful for him, because there was something else he went through that was physical that we don't know, but maybe was related to what was going on inside of him. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Back in August of 2023, he started getting weaker all of a sudden. One day he was doing gymnastics, and then a few days later, having trouble walking. And at first it was to the point of needing a walker. And then there was the point of he could use a walker only if someone was directly behind him, kind of pushing his feet. Even though the feet could actually stand, he didn't know how to use them anymore. So we ended up taking him to Duke Hospital on my 40th birthday. After a bunch of tests, he got diagnosed with something called functional neurologic disorder, in which the brain sends the wrong signals to the muscles.
Or none at all.
Yeah, or none at all. So he basically didn't remember how to walk, or it got to the point where he had to be in a wheelchair all the time. And that sort of the worst parts of it, he was just like slumped down and couldn't even sit up without assistance, couldn't even really use his arms much. Still could use his hands, but not really like lift things.
The way that Lars had described this to me earlier was that there was nothing physically wrong with the nerves. It was the process of the brain talking to the rest of the body, where it's like the brain's like, nope, I quit, basically.
And they say that with this disorder, there's a emotional / psychological link. Often it's trauma induced. We don't know if there was a specific trauma that set it off or not, but it is definitely emotionally linked. We could tell if there was an activity that Alex really liked doing, he was much more able to do it. For example, in the pool, he was much more capable than he was on land. And it's not just because of the buoyancy of the water. It was also because he really loved swimming. And so we ended up doing some physical therapy. A lot of it was focused on doing stuff in the pool because we knew that he could use his muscles a little bit more in the pool doing those activities that he was happier doing.
So when did it start to improve?
About 2 weeks after coming out.
That's interesting to me.
Yes. Now, being the scientific types that we are, I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but Christie has a PhD in biochemistry and teaches chemistry at college. And if you've heard me on the podcast before, I try to think scientifically most of the time. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say for sure that this is the causative factor. Mm-hmm. There are many reasons, other factors including more family support, more time at the pool, and the previous 10 months of physical therapy all probably help combine to help him recover. But regardless of the specific reason, about 2 weeks after coming out, he was able to get up out of his wheelchair and walk for the first time.
It's a miracle.
It certainly felt like it. To my family's credit, despite their fundamentalist leanings, when we let them know about it, they did not tell us it was a miracle. They actually kept that to themselves. I'm sure they felt like it was, but I respect the fact that they respected that we wouldn't see it that way.
Yeah, but in a similar way that we don't want them to ascribe this event to God, we don't want to ascribe the event to coming out.
Exactly.
As trans.
Yes. And I think that's a good way of trying to avoid bias.
Right. That's what scientific thinking is all about, is avoid bias to get at the truth.
But it's interesting.
It is.
It's interesting to think about.
It is certainly.
Can't say that it is.
It's worth considering.
Yeah. Were your parents praying through the whole time that he was in a wheelchair?
Oh, I'm sure. They prayed
they never said it to you,
all the time. Oh, no. They said that
every time we video chat, they say love and prayers and plenty of both.
We'll take the love and...
Yeah. And you can pray if you wish. But as you've discussed before, you could also pray to a milk bottle and get the same results.
Yes. Audrey, have you ever prayed? I'm talking to my daughter Audrey now. Have you ever prayed?
No.
Is there anything in your life that you think you're missing because you don't pray?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's a good study of like, you have everything you need, right? And you can never ask God for a single thing. So back to your parents, I was wondering how you told them about Alex and how they are taking it. And I know that you both have fundamentalist parents, right? Maybe Lars is worse.
More so than Christie's, yes.
Yeah, when we came out as atheists, we sent paper letters. But for this, we just did like a Facebook post, and we made sure that our family members, we sent a group text to our family members specifically with a link to a Google Doc, which matched what was on Facebook, just to make sure that like everybody saw it. We didn't want to get missed or like people to find out after each other and have a weird gossipy thing going.
And how do you think it was received?
Our parents never actually commented on it. Just my brother and his brother made like direct comments. But our parents have mostly avoided talking about it. They have both, I think, independently come to, I think, a relatively neutral way of dealing with the situation, which is to address him as A, which is the first letter of both his original name and current name. It's a decent compromise. Like, I get where they're coming from. I might have done the same thing myself in their position. At least, not using the old name, which is good.
They could be stubborn and digging their heels in and calling him Amy, which would be hurtful to him every time. I'm sure it's not a great feeling for him to hear A instead of his real name, Alex, but...
He said he finds it acceptable.
Okay.
That said, the response from my brother, I have 4 brothers, this is the second youngest one, who happens to share a birthday with Alex, actually, was extremely negative. It started out with shame on you, and went through a lot of not well-informed conservative talking points on the matter, which if you spent any time around Fox News or similar outlets, you've probably heard already. And
he said what we're encouraging
we're encouraging his mental illness.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
And he said he will refuse to call him anything but Amy and use female pronouns. Fortunately, he lives in Washington, and our contact is quite limited. Washington State, about 3,000 miles away.
That's better.
Yes.
Washington, D.C.
Yes.
He's not a Christian, though, right? Yeah.
No, he was actually... Yes, he is deconverted. He spent some time in the Marines, and that exposure to other ideas and time away from home was what he needed to break away from the faith. But just because you change your religious views, it doesn't necessarily mean you change your socio-political ones.
Yeah.
And so he's still very much the uninformed conservative that he was raised to be.
Well, I'm not sure your middle brother commented, but his wife did, about just a question of what makes this different from liking boy stuff.
Having a tomboy phase, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right.
And so we mentioned that, like, Alex's therapist had asked the question of, is it just these things? You know that girls can have friends that are boys. You know that girls can wear boy clothes. And Alex said, yes, I know all these things. And it's not just that, it's a feeling deep in me that I'm a boy. So like we had mentioned it in the group text that the therapist had
family group text?
Family group text. Okay. That the therapist had gone down this road of questioning, that the family was not too keen on the fact that we had a therapist.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Right. They interpreted this as a therapist pushing this ideology on him.
Right.
Which is exactly the opposite of what happened.
And I'm sure they would have wanted it to be a Christian therapist, not a secular therapist like I'm sure you got.
Right.
Yes. I don't actually know the therapist's religious values, and she's been quite good about keeping them to herself if she has any, and has been appropriately curious and supportive for Alex since that time. We have a therapist because functional neurologic disorder is a psychosomatic condition, and mental health treatment is just as important as physical therapy for recovery.
So did Alex start therapy when he started showing signs of functional... So you can tell my memory is horrible because I can never remember it.
Functional neurologic disorder.
Thank you. Functional neurologic disorder. Okay. I keep thinking it's neuropathy.
Yes. And for what it's worth, they were happy with having a therapist at that point. They understood why that could be important.
Okay.
I do wish I'd had that same freedom to see a therapist when I was younger. Mm-hmm. I did not. I spent several years depressed without any proper help. But at this point in their lives, they have come to understand the value of psychotherapy, in no small part because one of my siblings was almost at the point of ending their life and needed some professional help. And they finally saw the value of it at that point.
Okay. They didn't just say, read the Bible more?
No, that's what I got when I was depressed. That's what all my other siblings who were depressed between the ages of 20 and 26 got. But this particular one, I'm being as vague as possible here, needed professional help and actually got it and is doing well now.
That's good. I'm glad they got that help.
Yes. It is kind of funny how being the child of someone who is heavily depressed between the ages of 20 and 26, and then growing up to be heavily depressed between the ages of 20 and 26 is clearly a spiritual issue and could not in any way possibly be related to genetics or development.
Right.
The lack of mental health support is something that is very typical among fundamentalist religions, not just Christianity, but throughout the world, because when you think of things in terms of souls and spirits, and that the mind is an immaterial thing as opposed to a function of brains, well, getting help for those actual physical problems that have to do with your brain kind of puts a damper on that. And if that's something closely tied to your identity, as it would be in fundamentalism, well, that cognitive dissonance is very uncomfortable. And so most people choose to instead just avoid the therapy.
Yeah. It really does throw a wrench into the whole cogs of Christianity when our personality and what we do is based on our soul and how connected we are to the religion or Jesus or whatever. But then you start to learn how the brain influences your behavior. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't add up that it's only a religious thing. It's physical.
Yes. That's a realization I came to long before I started questioning any other bit of doctrine. Because the thing that really helped me break out of depression was getting a better job. I had an absolutely crappy job. It was actively contributing to my mental health decline. And when a friend of mine finally was able to get me an interview and turned into a job that was way better than the one I had before, my depression disappeared almost overnight. And so I'd been told many times that my depression had nothing to do with my circumstances, and it was all about my spiritual state of health. And when my circumstances changed and I got better, I realized that couldn't possibly be true.
Yeah.
It didn't make me change most of my views overnight, but it did change that one. Did you have any other questions for us about all these things, Audrey? It would be good to get your perspective.
She's a very curious mind. Would you like to give your perspective on therapy?
Sure.
Do you want us to say why you are in therapy?
I'm in therapy because I have ADHD, and that sometimes makes my emotions harder to control. And I feel like if I didn't have a therapist, then my life would have been a lot harder than it is now. And I feel like therapy is really helping me improve how I control my emotions and stuff.
I think it's helping too. I see a big difference since before we started therapy. She's been in therapy for about 2 years now. And when I was little, I had undiagnosed ADHD as well, not the hyperactive type, but the inattentive type. And since she started therapy, her therapist is like, I think you have it. And because they give you the checklist of these are all the things that we look for ADHD. And I was like, oh, well, when I was a kid, I had that. And then it's like, well, when you're an adult woman, this is what it looks like. And I was like, oh, that's me. So when I was a kid, it was forgetting things all the time. I got kicked off patrols because I forgot my post twice in a day. Those types of things are not normal. But my parents, it's not like they were anti-therapy, but they were it just would never have occurred to them. And instead, they just kept saying, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you just do this? Why can't you be different? And which was not helpful. I physically could not have been any other way than what I was. I could have used some therapy and maybe some drugs.
Yeah. As adults, both Christy and I now talk to therapists regularly to help us deal with issues and emotions in our lives, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
It's not magic, but it's also not spiritualism, which really is magic. It's really, in a sense, just another form of education. We learn how to have all other kinds of skills. Why not also learn emotional regulation and coping skills?
Yeah. So a lot of those things aren't natural to us, and they're also not taught in church.
And especially not if you are anywhere outside of what's considered neurotypical.
Yeah.
I definitely have autistic and ADHD tendencies myself. I know, big surprise.
I picked up on it, trust me.
But, when you're raised with the mentality that everyone is a blank slate and they are, as my therapist put it, an information pump where whatever is put in is also coming out. It leads to things like censorship of entertainment. It leads to memorizing lots of rules and following them as the only way to live. It leads to controlling people to the point where they often don't even realize that they could make certain choices about their lives. Where, for example, they will discount entire swaths of population as a potential relationship because they're not of the same religion, or for romantic purposes, not of the quote-unquote right gender or even number, as the case may be for some people. So when these choices are denied to you, you don't necessarily even realize that there's something missing until the point where you recognize that, hey, I am an adult. I can make my own choices. I don't need to follow these rules if I don't think they work. Mm-hmm. That realization, it's an unfolding one. There's still times 3 years on from deconverting that I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that now if I wanted. And so I have to make that choice for myself. I can't just see if it's following the rule. I have to see, okay, does this align with my goals, align with my values? Does it affect other people? Does it affect other people in a way that aligns with my goals and my values? Yeah. It's more complicated, but it's much more liberating.
So it's very hard to shed those old habits of what we were taught. So for you, it's like rated R movies.
Rated R movies, that's my big bugaboo, yep.
Yeah. And my dad's really conservative, and this doesn't really have anything to do with religion, but when I told him when I was like 16 or 17, I wanted to get my ears double pierced, he said that I would be a floozy and I would never get a job. And I went on, and when I was 18, to get my ears double pierced, and I'm not a floozy and do have a really good job. And
she also has a third piercing.
Well, so that's what I was just about to say, is that we got her ears pierced for her 9th birthday, and she says, when I get my ears pierced, will you get a third hole, like a third piercing? And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So I did that. And then my dad visited yesterday, and I was like, Dad, look. And then I had like this moment of terror of like, what's he going to think of me? What's he going to think of me that I have 3 earrings in my ears? And he was fine about it. But it's like that fear is ingrained in you of, I don't want to disappoint my parents.
Yeah. Even at 40 years old, I still care what my parents think.
I know. I really do care. And I don't know why, but my therapist has been working with me on it, and I have these Post-it notes on my wall to remind me. One of them says, you don't need to feel guilty when other people disapprove of your choices. And it's really helping me to remind me every day that I don't need to worry about what they think of me. I just need to worry about living an authentic life. And whatever that means to them, that's their business. Mm-hmm. I can't control that.
Yeah, the way I see it is there disapproval based on things that are true and things that actually are harmful if they think that what I'm doing is wrong? And as it turns out, most of the time when it comes from fundamentalists, the answer is no. I did recently receive an email from my dad expressing some of his views. Yes, he mentioned some things about hormone therapy, which we are not yet doing, being something that he thought would lead to a suicidal thought, which is not true. The opposite is true. People who have their gender identity repressed are much more likely to consider ending their own lives. And that's one of the many reasons why we want to be supportive. Yeah. Because we don't want that to happen. We don't want Alex to cut ourselves out of his life or himself. So, Alex, do you feel like we've been supportive and encouraging you to be your best self?
Yeah.
Are you happier now that you have come out as Alex?
Yeah. I feel much better about it. And it's easier for me to talk about stuff that I wasn't used to talking about.
I'm wondering, since you just got done with camp, how did you feel about being in the boys' cabin this year instead of the girls' cabin? What was that like?
It was much more different, but it felt much better than how it felt before.
That's how you know it's real, because if I told her she had to stay in the boys' cabin, I don't think you'd be very happy.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, and so that's the fact that you feel happier and safer with the boys is really telling to me. Well, I'm glad that you have come out as your authentic self and that you are happier now. I know when I came out as ex-Christian, I felt the euphoria. Do you know what that means?
No.
Like super happy, extremely happy. That's how I felt when I came out as my authentic self. And that's how Christianity always said you would feel when you accept Jesus or when you're saved. But I never experienced that as a Christian. I only experienced that when I left.
Same here.
That kind of feeling? Yeah, I know your parents too. Is that kind of how you feel now that you've come out as that you would like to be known as a boy?
Yeah.
You feel like super happy inside?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt the people who have a conversion experience and feel euphoric about it.
Yeah.
They certainly do.
They do.
Having a sense of who you are is a great feeling, and not everyone manages to achieve it. And I don't want to deny that to people. But at least for me, it's so much better to be able to have that feeling based on things that I know are true.
Yeah.
One of the things that made me euphoric when I deconverted was, I said I feel like my authentic self, but like part of feeling like my authentic self was the freedom to, love people fully, even when they're doing things the Bible says is sin or that the preachers say is sin.
Yeah.
And so, I had situations like this in mind of people that I love being trans. And in the past, I wasn't able to fully support them. And now, there's that euphoria on deconverting that, I can choose to support the people that I want to support.
Yeah. And that's probably a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Because it enables you to support Alex.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas maybe 5 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I still said things like that, I'd say thank God for deconverting.
Yeah. So, Audrey, I wanted to get your perspective. Maybe put the chip down. All right, move this. I wanted to get your perspective on if you have feelings about not going to church anymore. And I don't think you really remember going to church that much. Do you?
I remember, I don't, remember any of the stories or, anything that really happened, but, I do, remember, flashbacks, not, little tiny, videos, but, more, little pictures. I remember sort of what the pastor looked like.
Okay.
And how I always gave him a high five when I went out, but then I came back and I gave him another on it.
Okay, so you don't really remember specific things that being taught in church. What about preschool? Because you went to a religious preschool.
I remember most of that, but I remember more of the fun parts, not the parts about
the Bible stories.
Yeah, and I also remember sometimes that kind of hurt my feelings, I'm really shy, so I don't like to dance in front of people, and they said everyone has to dance, and then they kicked me out because I wasn't dancing. And
I didn't know that.
So yeah,
you did not conform, Audrey.
Yeah, and I remember some of those bad parts, but I don't remember any Bible stories or anything.
Okay.
I just remember fun parts.
Yeah, I think that you were pretty young that we undid most of that. But how do you feel now being a non-religious person? Because I know some of your friends are religious, and we drive by churches a lot, and your entire family outside of the four of us are religious. How do you feel about that?
At some points of time, I kind of got embarrassed, right when my friends started finding out. But after that, they didn't really have any feelings about it. One of my friends said they couldn't be friends with me anymore because I didn't believe in God. And then they changed their mind because they realized that I was actually a good person. And that's one of the things that I got kind of embarrassed about. But truly, I cared that I was losing my friend. But then at the same time, I felt good about being who I want to be.
Yeah.
And, doing what I...
And that's always the struggle, is that sometimes when we are who we want to be, we lose people. But luckily you didn't lose her.
Yeah.
Teddy, do you have anything that you want to add? This is Teddy. This is Lars and Christie's oldest son.
Hello.
And how old are you?
12.
Okay. And do you remember going to church?
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry, I have a raspy throat today.
That's okay. So what do you remember about church? Do you remember it positively or negatively?
Well, I mostly remember that they told us stories, and then afterwards they made us play games, and then they gave us Cheez-Its. I mean, that's basically how most of the quote-unquote lessons went.
Cheez-Its. I love that. I love that so much.
But it was.
And how did you feel when your parents told you that? I think they sat you down, right? They sat you down and explained that they don't believe it anymore. And how did that make you feel?
I didn't really have much of an opinion. I don't know if I agreed or disagreed then, but...
You said that makes sense, so I think you agreed.
Okay.
You must have had some ruminations going on inside of you. Some thoughts.
And you were the one that remembered that... Well, you said, what haven't we been going to? And you were the one that said church.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because we hadn't been going for years.
Years?
A year and a half.
Yeah, a year and a half.
It was COVID, right? Was it during COVID?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when we left, too, during COVID. COVID made everything easier to leave because you didn't have to face people. How do you feel now not being a religious family?
I basically feel the same as always, since I never really was that religious.
Okay.
But it does feel nice not having to go to church.
Yeah, I agree. I like sleeping in on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
With both Teddy and Alex, I've spent some time reading parts of the Bible with them to give them an understanding of what it actually says. Mm-hmm. How would you feel if you had to believe that everything you'd heard there was true and good and instructive for how you should live your life?
If they actually told the stories about that God gave the orders to kill everybody, I would question it.
As you should.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Alex?
Same.
Yeah. We were not given the space to question anything when we were your age.
Because they basically taught us question if you don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we encouraged even before we officially deconverted, because we already knew there were many things that we'd been taught not to question that had turned out poorly for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really important that we've taught our kids to question, because that's how we ultimately rid the world of bad ideas.
Yep.
And it's going to take a while, but you are the new generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, anything else to add before we wrap up? Anybody else have anything profound to say?
Not really.
It doesn't actually feel that big of a change with Alex being trans, not in my opinion.
Okay. Maybe because he was always this way.
Yeah.
He just had a different name.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Well, I'm glad that you're being a supportive brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and for doing a very last-minute episode.
Thanks for having us. It's been a great time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Flawed Theology Podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Susie. Tune in next time where we will continue to tackle the question, if your theology were wrong, wouldn't you want to know?
Follow us on Facebook at the Flawed Theology Podcast, and please join our Facebook group called Dangerous Questions. Listen to us on our website, which is flawedtheologypodcast.com, or any place that you get your favorite podcasts. And we will talk to you next time.
See you next time.